Relational spirituality is a model we use in the Research Center at the Danielson Institute. We use it to foreground the role of relational dynamics in spirituality, in clinical practice, and also in training. If you look at the mental health literature on spirituality, there are actually dozens of definitions in use. Given our preference for relational models of care at Danielson, we found it helpful to study spirituality through a relational lens. We start by defining spirituality as ways of relating to the sacred. This approach opens up conceptual space to consider a myriad of ways individuals relate to whatever they consider sacred. These ways can include trust, avoidance, mindfulness, bargaining, intimacy, complaint, and many others. Let me describe a couple examples. One man in his late 50s comes into an initial meeting, and first words out of his mouth were, "God has a shit list, and I've been on that shit list for 40 years. Now, if you heard his story, his experience of relational spirituality would make sense, even if it was also a source of alienation and suffering for him. Another client, a woman widowed in her mid-70s, was dealing with intense loneliness and loss. She said she tried to cope by imagining herself being held by her heavenly mother, the mother she always dreamed of having. So in trying to understand these differing types of relational spirituality, we're drawing on research in neurobiology that shows spiritual experiences often engage limbic-based brain processes of perceived relatedness. Attachment theory and other psychodynamic models also help us to understand how interpersonal experiences across our development can shape our relational templates or internal working models about the sacred. And in reciprocal fashion, our spiritual experiences that can range from terrifying to transformative, impact how we approach our relationships, both for better and for worse. This relational approach is also consistent with the vast empirical evidence that relational factors are among the strongest predictors of positive outcomes in psychotherapy. Developing a constructive therapeutic alliance is a key to many relational models of psychotherapy and psychiatric care. And a vital part of the therapeutic alliance involves a clinician's respectful interest and engagement with a client's beliefs and values. Data from our research fits with findings in other settings, suggesting that the majority of clients consider spirituality and religion relevant to their presenting concerns. For example, a client may have a fear their struggles are some kind of sign from God they need to understand, or an expression of karma that doesn't make sense to them yet. Or they could feel angry that leaders in their spiritual community have not lived up to their ideals. If we broaden our clinical considerations to issues of existential meaning, then over 80% of clients in our research view questions of meaning as relevant to their goals in therapy. The capacity for clinicians to relate effectively around spiritual and existential issues requires a high degree of sensitivity and attunement. This is because clients might want to unpack questions about some of their deepest beliefs and values. They may need help wrestling with a difficult moral dilemma, or they could be struggling to deal with bitter disappointments or even trauma related to the sacred. Now, you might be thinking about the important diversity challenges of spirituality and religion in clinical practice. It is true in many cases clinicians and clients will be from different spiritual traditions or orientations. And couples therapy and group therapy introduce even greater complexities of spiritual diversity in the room. There are risks of bias among clinicians who might respond to such differences by internally disparaging or even idealizing certain spiritual and religious perspectives. Our research suggests that humility, a long-held value at Danielson, is a central quality of the kinds of relational spirituality that can foster understanding and connection amidst differences. We're hopeful that clinicians who remain grounded in humility and offer clients a well-differentiated relationship, that is, a relationship that values differences and remains open to new learning, will help facilitate healing and growth. But all this raises the question, how can clinicians develop and sustain healthy forms of humility and relational spirituality? Clinical work is stressful. At times, it's even existentially dysregulating as we get exposed to profound levels of tragedy, suffering, and despair. It's natural for clinicians to sometimes feel confused, discouraged, or uninformed about how to approach certain cases. Our relational spirituality model places a premium on cultivating healthy relational ecologies for clinical training and consultation. Clinical ecologies are holding environments with consistent times of connection to foster self-awareness, open dialogue, and the metabolizing of countertransference. There's actually limited research on spirituality and religion in clinical training, but the available data suggests it's not books, classes, or continuing education seminars that make the greatest impact. It's relational experiences of sharing our stories, of knowing and being known. And we find this is just as true for seasoned clinicians as it is for novices. Throughout our professional journeys, we can benefit from the wisdom, clarity, and limbic recalibration that comes from community with colleagues who are also seeking to learn and grow.